You're listening to the Business Mike podcast. Amazing interviews with entrepreneurs and industry thought leaders.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Business Mike podcast. And joining me today is Michael. Michael, can you let the listeners know a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. Thank you for the invitation, Tony. So, my name is Michael Brandt. I'm the founder and senior consultant for Michael Brandt CX Excellence, and I'm based in Lugano in Switzerland. I worked for a large corporation, ABB, for 25 years. And during those 25 years, I got to spend 7 years in Japan as head of a joint venture company there. And that's where I really got into customer experience, finding out about how companies treat customers in a culture like Japan, which is very customer-centric. And when I returned to Switzerland, to the head office, I was in charge of ABB's customer experience program, customer loyalty program, so NPS program, and also complaint management. I worked there until spring of 2020, when I left the company and then set up by myself as an independent consultant, mainly focusing on customer experience strategy, voice of customer, and customer journey mapping, and of course, complaint management.
Right. And there's a question I always ask my guests on the show, and that is how they ended up in the customer experience profession. Usually it's a transition from one field into the customer experience, and I'm just curious about your story, how that happened.
Well, so as I said, I spent 7 years in Japan, and that was from a customer experience perspective. It was really an eye-opener, and I could tell you many stories of experiences there in Japanese stores, which were mind-blowing for both my wife and I. And when I came back then to head office, I started off as a quality manager, as the interface between customers and the factory, because generally people from the factory have trouble talking directly to customers. They don't necessarily understand the requirements that customers have, and so there needs to be a middleman, and that was me. And I realized, how dealing with customers on a day-to-day basis, how gratifying it can be if you get things right, or if you can meet their expectations, if you can meet their requirements. And so that's when I really got sold on the idea of customer experience. I started off with a quality background, but then that became then more than a customer experience, because it was all about delivering on a regular basis, on a consistent basis to the customers, the right thing first time.
Well, I'm very excited to have you on the show today, in particular to discuss two pertinent topics. The first of which is customer surveys. And this stems from a blog that you have on your website, talking about the fatigue that customers have with surveys and how they are not necessarily done right in some cases. And I want to start off by asking you where some organizations go wrong with their surveys. The point that comes to mind for me is the lack of response. So customers tend to have a mindset of the surveys are basically a waste of time because they're not acted on. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that in terms of the fatigue from the customer's point of view.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Customers are fatigued by surveys, and so they don't respond. And the question is, why are they fatigued? Why don't they bother responding? Because most of them will tell you it's a waste of time, right? Nobody's listening anyway. And unfortunately, in many cases, they're right. Many companies send out surveys because it's the done thing, and they have no real interest, though, in knowing, what the customer thinks. Surveys are designed badly. They don't ask the right questions, or the questions aren't asked in the correct way. if you're sending a survey to a customer, what you want to do, you want to find out what the issues are, right? And very often surveys are worded in such a way that they don't really give the customer the opportunity to explain what the issues are. And as I say, in many cases, even if they did, you have to wonder whether anybody's listening. And so I think that's one of the main issues why customers are fed up. I can give you an example. Recently, I responded to something that was on a website asking for a service, and I got an answer 2 days later saying, our company doesn't provide service in your area. Okay, fine, all right, that was an answer. And then 2 days later, I get a survey asking me how satisfied I was with their service. Why send it to me? They couldn't offer me the service. They told me that, fine, that's good. But then why send me a survey and ask me what I think, right? It's ridiculous. And I think there are too many companies out there that are doing stuff like this. People see surveys coming on their computer, on their telephone, and they say, leave me alone.
I think one of the challenges with what you mentioned is the automation. So once they've captured your email, they just blast out these surveys without necessarily taking the time to find out who is a customer, who left the business, and things like that. And so I think there comes a time where you need the human interface. And I think you mentioned that in your blog, where you respond to people personally and they get to know that, okay, I'm dealing with a human being. It's not one of those data collection things where no one will respond to me.
Sure. Look, I have to say, I come from a B2B background, right? And obviously, if you're looking at the difference between B2B and B2C, when it comes to things like that, it's immense, right? I mean, for instance, if Apple send out surveys, you can't expect them to talk to every customer that responds, right? I mean, that's just not feasible. So in the B2C setting, there are constraints just by virtue of the volume of surveys that might go out and the feedback comes back in. But in the B2B environment, there's absolutely no justification for not seeking a dialogue with customers. Right? And I think this is something that many B2B companies don't do, and they miss out on this opportunity. I'm doing a project at the moment with a company, and we're telling the various units to go out and interview customers. Go and talk to them. They have a script, they have questions. Go and talk to your customers. And the feedback is amazing, not just from the customer itself, but also for the people who are doing the interviews. Right? The customers are saying, wow, that's great. You're the first company that actually wants to listen to what I have to say, to what my issues are, what my requirements are, what my needs are, how I think the market might change over the next 2 to 3 years. And that's important information for a supplier. But also the people who are going out and doing these interviews, they're also saying, that was a great experience. Actually talking to the customer, one-on-one, face-to-face, without the pressure of having to make a sale. Because that's not what they're going to talk to the customer to talk about requirements, issues, changing markets, not to make a sale. And they say it's fantastic to have that conversation with the customer without the pressure of making a sale, and getting all this information in a very relaxed atmosphere. They say some of the things we found out were really great. And this is the missed opportunity for many companies, because these one-on-one conversations really give you the golden nuggets of information. And if you do this on a regular basis, and it can be annually, right? It doesn't have to be more frequent than that. You'll see the relationship with the customer grow and strengthen. Of course, here again, just like with the written surveys, it's important to do something with what you hear, right? So you want to, even if you go and talk to a customer face to face, you want to keep in touch with them and let them know what you're doing with what they've told you, right? And this really then shows the customer that they're being taken seriously, they're being listened to, and that will strengthen the relationship and the bond between the customer and the supplier. And sooner or later, the customer will really feel like they're in a partnership, and it's not anymore just a simple customer-supplier relationship. And that's what you want to achieve, really.
Yeah. And just to add on to what you said, I have a question in terms of when you interact with these customers and get some feedback. Of course, you can't do that for all of them, perhaps one or two. Let's say it's a particular device and you realize if it's used in a certain way that leads to one error. Would you then take that feedback and share that with the customers you're not interfaced with, just letting them know that we've done a survey around and we've discovered this is a potential problem with your device, let's fix it in this way. And if you have any additional information, please share that with us and we'll help give you a better, service overall.
Absolutely. I mean, why not share that information? You're doing the customer a favor. It also makes you look as though you're being proactive, right? I mean, one of the things that really irritates me a lot is when you call a company, you say, I've got a problem with this and this machine, and this is what's happening. And they say, oh, this is the first time we've heard about it. And you know absolutely that that's not the first time they've heard about it, right? So I think if you hear about issues, and I'm not saying if just one person complains, that might be an outlier. But if you get several people complaining about a certain issue with a product, yes, well, it's let other customers know. If you know who's bought it, let them know, tell them what the fix is, tell them, how they can avoid this mistake. And if it's a design issue, well, then fix it.
Yeah, right. The other talking point I wanted to share with you is the Net Promoter Score, NPS, and the over-reliance on it as a metric to measure customer satisfaction. And one of the challenges with it is that it leads to organizations chasing the number as opposed to the experience. So once they hit a certain number in as far as the score is concerned, they leave it at that and they don't necessarily go beyond it. So what would your advice be in terms of using this NPS the correct way or avoiding over-reliance on it?
Sure. I think here again, the issue is very often that companies that use the NPS, they use it because they think it's easy. And actually, NPS is very easy to explain, but it's not so easy to implement if you want to do it properly, right? Because NPS is just one question, right? How likely are you to recommend on a scale of 0 to 10? That's fine. But then what you need to do is to find out why the customer is giving you that particular rating. Right? And this is where many companies don't necessarily pay attention. So they have a score, but they don't necessarily know, how to improve, right? So they really need to dive into the drivers and find out why are the customers giving us that score. And my attitude has always been, never mind the score. If you focus on the issues and fix the issues, the score will look after itself, right? But of course, unfortunately, too many companies give bonuses to their staff based on NPS scores, and this then encourages gaming and people chasing after the score, and that's unhealthy, right? So you really need to focus on the issues, and certainly, if you're going to give bonuses based on score, they're not down to the individual level where, somebody can harass their customers to get a better score. And it's been done. I had customers call me and say, I gave your company a 1, but then, the sales guy visited me and he said, that wasn't so great for him. So can I change my score to an 8 or a 9, right? Obviously, the answer is no. But you really need to try and get away from a situation where staff feel they need to try and chase customers for a good score, because this is also something that irritates customers. Get away from the score altogether and focus on the drivers. What are the issues? What are the things that are determining the score that we're getting? And this isn't just true for NPX, it's true for any customer metric that you might use. It's the same for CSAT, for instance. You ask, how satisfied are you? If you're only focusing on the number and not on the reasons, then this is also, it's unhealthy and it's not very productive.
Yeah, my interpretation of it is the way you look at the human body, and there's a perfect weight that says you're healthy, but then you focus on that number instead of just eating healthy and living a healthy lifestyle. So the goal is not to get that number. It's just an indicator that you're healthy, but it doesn't mean you have to live and breathe by that number. That's how I interpret it.
Absolutely. And I think the important thing is, people like to say, okay, well, our target is, such and such a number. In the organization that I used to work for, all we said was, you need to improve. There has to be a positive evolution from one year to the next, right? But we didn't set a numerical target, because that doesn't make any sense. We just need to see an improvement. And the other thing, of course, which is very important, especially if you're working in a global organization, is not to compare, countries amongst themselves, because they all have different cultures. They have a different way of evaluating. So if for instance, you look at China and Japan, they're polar opposites when it comes to survey evaluations. The Japanese give very low scores. The Chinese tend to give very high scores. So our Chinese organization had a great score. Our Japanese organization, the score was a lot lower. And my Japanese colleagues were saying, how can this be? I said, don't worry, don't focus on that. Just focus on your own score year on year. Ensure that don't try and compare yourself with any other countries, because the culture is different, so the scoring is different. And that's something also that needs to be borne in mind with large organizations that are operate across different geographies.
Right. And as we wind down the interview, are there any developments or trends that you're seeing in the customer experience field coming along now or in the near future that give you hope?
Well, I would say there are certain things that we need to be careful with. The use of AI and technology. AI and technology can be a super improvement in helping us to understand. But what's really important is not to let AI or technology take the place of the human being. So I saw one influencer recently who said, AI is great, soon we won't have to talk to the customers. Well, until the customers are robots, we still want to try and keep that human touch. So I think that's really important. But I also think that customer experience is becoming more important. Customers are becoming pickier. They have a lot of information available to them on the internet, so they're able to compare offerings, amongst the various different suppliers. So I think it's important to become, top of your game, and I think that's where now CX is getting more focus, because companies realize that if they want to be competitive, they have to offer their customers a good experience.
Right. Well, that brings us to the end of the interview, Michael. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. And how can people get in touch with you, learn more about what you do, and connect with you?
Sure. Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. So Michael Brandt, CCXP. Always happy to connect. Or you can go to my website, www.cx-excellence.com. And I'm always happy to connect with other CX passionate people.
Right. Well, Michael, thank you so much for sharing your time with us, and I wish you the very best.
Thank you very much, Dodi, for the invitation.